So where is it you're wanting to start with this
Well,
information?
I'll just do a wee intro just now. But we'll do a main introduction of you sort of separately. So I won't do that just now. I'll just give you the kind of background to why we're sitting here talking. So
Okay.
and then I'll ask you to, well, maybe to begin with, what I'll say is just, can you give us a bit of a potted history of the claim of right? But so that's how we'll start. And then we'll just see how it goes, Jenny. Right. So. Excuse me. This is always happens. So, welcome everyone. We're carrying on with this month's edition of the Indy Jigsaw show, and I'm sitting here with Jenny Eales. So, thanks so much. Welcome to the Indy Jigsaw show, Jenny, and thanks so much for coming to talk to us. We really appreciate that.
No, you're very welcome. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, great. And your cat.
And Zara Cat, yeah.
So look, so we've been doing these programs about the Constitution, and as well as having kind of a bit more set, longer interviews with people. Fiona and I have been out and about. We were over in Edinburgh, we were up in Mulgai, and we're just talking to people and asking, have they thought, what do they think? But should Scotland have a written constitution, or for that matter, should the UK have a written constitution?
Yeah.
Um, so, and one of the things that came out of talking to people was folk would refer to the claim of right. Now, I'm of a generation that wasn't taught any Scottish history, so I knew nothing.
Yeah.
I know a little bit more now, but people would refer to it, but they wouldn't necessarily seem to know a great deal about it. But we thought, well, it's obviously out there, at least amongst some of the independent supporting kind of folk. So, what would be really good is if could we start off? Could you maybe just give us a bit of a potted history about what the claim of right is, and how it came about? Maybe we could start there and then see where we go from after that.
Sure. The claim of right was really Scots asserting uh, their right to question authority, really. Scots were always of a mind that any authority that governed them was to be there by consent, that it wasn't a position that just anyone should be able to hold, and they shouldn't have ultimate power and complete say over just things that determined what happened in Scots life and affected Scots life and way of life. They Scots have been very fond of self determination
Yeah.
since time immemorial. They always elected their own chiefs. It was always a fairly democratic
Uh,
situation that we lived in. And that really didn't end until after Culloden, and it was the after effects of Culloden that gave the chiefs and lairds more power than they'd ever had before. They no longer
right.
had to answer to their people, really. But the claim of right obviously came before that. That was 1689 that the claim of right came in. Patrick Fraser actually says in the Scotsman of March 1875, it was an article that we included in our Treaty of Union articles. He says, and I'll just read because he just said it very well, laid it out. He said the right of appeal to Parliament from the judgments of the Court of Session was asserted by the Scottish Bar in the year 1674, and for so doing, the whole members of the Faculty of Advocates were banished from Edinburgh by the authority of the Crown, Charles II being then king. The people of Scotland would not submit to this, and
Oh,
accordingly, in the claim of right presented to King William and Queen Mary in 1689, this constituted one of the articles, that it is the right and privilege of the subjects to protest for remedy of law to the King and Parliament against sentences pronounced by the Lords of Session. That claim of right was accepted as a condition upon which these sovereigns were to be recognised as King and Queen of Scotland. So that lends itself to the idea that the Scots are sovereign. We don't answer to a monarchy the monarchy answers to us. Authority answers to the people. And it was always with a view to being beneficial to the population of Scotland and the way of life of Scots. And as we see from Culloden in 1745, that really decimated a lot of the ground that was laid by the claim of right, because the claim of right was accepted as legislation. It was accepted by the monarchy. It was accepted by the Parliament of Scotland at the time. It was law, you know. But after the Union and after, I mean, Culloden itself and the 15 Rebellion were civil wars that came as a protest to the Union. Scots didn't just want to put their own guy in the throne. That wasn't the sole purpose of that. It wasn't just to sit James on the throne or Charles on the throne. They felt that by putting these people on the throne, these people would then end the union with England and make Scotland its own country again. That's why Scots were willing to overlook all of the issues with those sovereigns, because those were sovereigns that didn't fully believe in the claim of right. These were sovereigns that felt that they were there by right of God, not by the people of Scotland, and not by consent. But the people of Scotland saw these people as a means to an end, you know. So in that way, the Union had a result and an effect, and gave us two civil wars that ended up with the Act of Prescription and a huge change in the lifestyles of the people of Scotland, and obviously led to the clearances. And we could go
Yeah,
into a whole thing
yeah,
about that, you know.
yeah.
So,
And I mean that 1689 document, yeah, and at the end of it, they declare the throne is empty, and then they offer it to William and Mary, as you say, with those provisos is
mhm,
in it. And the main reason for getting all that done was because Scotland was in a bit of a pickle, wasn't it? Because James the seventh and the second, he'd fled from England
yeah,
over to France. So it was easy for the English Parliament at the time to say, okay, well, he's abdicated, so the throne's empty. William and Mary, you take it on. But it was a bit, Scots couldn't
yeah,
quite say that because he hadn't fled from Scotland. And
mm,
as I
yeah,
understand it, that whole kind of claim of right, document and wording, it primarily it was to clear the path for William and Mary being appointed as joint monarchs, wasn't it? And
yeah,
I've read it through. It's fascinating. I mean, it's of its time.
of course,
It's of its time. I mean, there's sort of like we're having no papists here. That's a big part of it. And then the other part of it, as you say, is that the king is subject to the laws
the people,
and the laws of the country. And I was
yeah,
quite taken with it. There's a bit that says declared that must have been James had said that husbands were liable to be fined if their wives absented themselves from the church. So, and in the claim of
yeah.
right, it says that's nonsense. That we're not having that any longer. So I was telling my husband. He said, "Oh, that's good because he says you absented yourself from the church a long time ago, and he suddenly thought, well, I might have been fined for it. But
You
so
still
it's
see,
quite
oh,
it was a bit of a turning point, wasn't it? Something needed to shift in Scotland to get us away from the pickle that we were in and into a new monarch. And I mean, hopefully, it would have been a
well,
better one.
yeah, I don't feel like they felt like they had an option. I mean, they'd restricted themselves with that whole nay papist thing. So really, the first connection with the Stuarts was Mary, because she was the first and next Protestant
Yeah,
heir.
yeah,
So it wasn't, they didn't pick her because she deserved the position in any way. She was really just their only option at the time. And I don't know that Scots were entirely into that. And I think they needed to lay down the law with them before they even came into power,
yeah,
and just make them realise what it was that they were going to be taking on by
yeah,
becoming monarchs of Scotland.
yeah, yeah,
Scots have never been people to hold back. Like we like to just say it as it is and go, listen, you need to understand, right? and
Yeah.
that's basically what the
Yeah,
claim of right
exactly.
is. You know, it's almost an ultimatum to the authorities, you know, from
Yeah,
the people.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know what you'd, if you'd agree with this, but, I mean, I'm sure you'd be there've been various, other occasions when the claim of right has been, quoted and used as an argument. So, uh, I mean, there was certainly one in 1989. That was all to do with moving towards setting up the Scottish Parliament again, and the claim of right, or there was a form of words came out of that, and then 2012, 2000, there've been various debates, one in Holyrood 2012, a couple down in Westminster, and I was listening to one that happened in 2016. So that was just post-Brexit. SNP called this debate in I think it was the, Westminster Hall, and, Patrick Grady led off, and I have to admit, I didn't listen to the whole of the debate, but I listened to the beginning of it, and he started off by saying that the claim of right was no longer, I'll just read it, no longer just a historic document, it's a concept and a principle which now underpins the democracy and constitutional framework of Scotland. So would you agree with that?
I would agree with that in as much the Declaration of Growth is. These are historical documents that, like you said, they're of their time. I, these are things that can be used as a basis, as a springboard to
Yeah,
something contemporary.
yeah,
Don't I'll love my historical documents like that. I mean, I'm a collector of contemporary source material, but I don't feel like you can then just go, oh, well, see this act from this bill of 300 years ago. Look, this is how it should be. Because no, you have a chance here to make something new, something contemporary, and something that is fit for purpose for the population as it is now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't feel I don't feel like it has very much relevancy beyond that. You
yeah,
can quote these things as to give an idea of how the Scots of the past viewed a thing, and you can draw correlations and you can make comparisons with how it is now, but you can't use it as your argument for a thing because I mean, it's like using the Treaty of Union as a thing. It's been subverted so often. There's been so many changes that it's no longer really applicable
mm,
in any real sense to how it is now. You know, I mean, again, that's a whole other thing where they were able to make changes if it was for the benefit of Scotland. But then, who was deciding what was of benefit to Scotland? The English
yeah,
mainly Parliament was deciding what was to the benefit of Scotland. So yeah, these things are fantastic to use as a basis. But what we do need is people to create something new. And I mean, the Americans use the Declaration of Our Growth for their own Declaration of Independence. So it's not as if we're beyond being able to do that for ourselves and coming up with something more contemporary and
yeah,
more
yeah,
useful, you
yeah.
know?
I really like that phrase you just used, that, those documents, those historical documents, can be a springboard to
Yeah,
enable us to move into something
yeah,
that, it needs to be up to date.
absolutely.
It needs to be, we're going to be a new nation, or at least a nation reasserting its
Yeah.
independence, and we need something that meets the times that we're in, isn't it? So I think that springboard, image is really good one.
Yeah, we can't constantly be harking back to the past, when what we're wanting to do mainly is create a positive future for ourselves. We can learn lessons from what's come before, but not really more than that, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
We're trying to build something from the ground up. What we're looking to do is draw a line under the whole thing and start anew and create something for ourselves. that's far more democratic, I guess, than a situation than we're in just now. We've Scots being so underrepresented for the last 300 odd years at Westminster. We've not really had a say over our own affairs, and it's about time that we got some self determination back, because it's just knocked the confidence out of Scots for
Mm,
centuries now, and
mm,
we need to get that confidence back. We need to believe in ourselves. We've done these great things in the past. We've come up with these great pieces of legislation in the past. Scottish laws were always held higher than English. We we have it within us to create something brand new and brilliant and properly modern, and actually lead other countries on the world stage towards something that's more progressive, inclusive. Do you know what I
mm.
mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's I mean, that's just a great that's just a really great way of putting it, and maybe the fact that that's happened, over the centuries is connected with what you said at the beginning, that, there's something about how we've, uh, maybe not better say inbuilt, but there's something about how we've uh, formed our society over all those centuries, where that had a bit of at least a kernel of what these days we'd call something that's a bit more democratic. So people jointly coming to a decision about what's best suited to themselves. I mean, maybe because that's a bit, yeah, inbuilt in us, that that there have, it has enabled us to do all those sort of things
I think
since. And
I think despite the lack of confidence that centralisation has led to, part of that is what we know as the Scottish cringe.
yeah,
Um, I think despite that knock to our nation's self confidence, I think there's just that inherent strong desire in us, um, to do things our own way, and just yeah, we I mean we're already showing, we haven't stopped showing ourselves to be more progressive. I mean, we ended up with more death penalties after the Union, inherited from England. We ended up with traitor laws inherited from England, but we've managed to get beyond that, to the point where we're able to distinguish ourselves from England despite the Union. We're able to have more rights
yeah,
for people in the form of free healthcare and free education, are two of the really main rights that Scots have. Even as hampered as we are, that strength is still within us, and I think that's what history is good to show, is the fact that Scots have never stopped fighting. When I did the show with John Drummond, I'd heard an interview that he'd done the week before, where the guy he was talking to was saying that there wasn't really this uh, desire for self determination for Scots to take it upon themselves and take their country back until the 1960s. And it was just entirely incorrect. It was a
yeah,
man that didn't know his history,
yeah,
because Scots have never stopped fighting for what they believed in. Scots have never stopped fighting for the rights of the people,
yeah,
and against the encroachments that kept coming from Westminster continuously.
yeah,
And
yeah,
centralising was a big deal. Centralisation was a huge deal, and it has so much to answer for, because it's led to our histories being muddled, and this whole England and English instead of Britain British, that's still so inherent, and you still hear it all over the place. And even in Scottish historical textbooks by Scottish publishers for Scottish schools, you were getting like James the First being
nice,
talked about when it was James the Sixth they actually meant.
yeah,
And it's this kind of, it's the little insidious things
yeah,
that have made it into our culture. And well, we're just having a discussion on Twitter there that involved Eddie Reader too. We were talking about how just speaking our own language, the Scots. I mean, my own mum would have me repeat a thing until I said it correctly, and that's what the Scottish cringe is kind of born from. It's the idea that you weren't good enough as a person. You weren't deserving of the better things in life if you didn't speak a certain way and hold yourself a certain way. and purport. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do know what you mean. I mean, I must say, I think it, I mean, there is that, yeah, the Scottish cringe is like what it's called. And I mean, I must say, I think that across England, there's an equivalent of that that's class based. Um, Here it's kind of, well, if you're Scottish, you know, yeah, it's maybe if you're Scottish, that's enough to feel a bit cringy. In England, it's maybe more class based. But that was really interesting what you said about you know, the guy who'd been interviewed, and him not knowing his history enough, because and
Yeah,
I know what I noticed, there was the last, I think it's the last time there's been a debate based on the former words coming out from the claim of rights. So the modern former words is that Scotland's got the right to take the decisions for a government that's best suited to its needs. That's the kind of
sure.
modern framing of it. And in
Yeah,
2018, there was a debate in the House of Commons. Ian Blackford led it off, and at the end of it, Tommy Shepherd, MP, he kind of summed up, and I was really taken with what he said, because what he said actually just backs up everything you've been saying, chatting here, because he sort of said that the idea of popular sovereignty has been there in Scotland, you know, for a long, long time.
yeah,
And then he starts to give examples. So he sort of said, well, 300 years ago, it was that idea that was behind, you know, the actions of the dissenters, who they were protesting against the union. And then a couple of hundred years ago, he reckons it was more like people like Thomas Muir, who were trying to get the, you know, the voting franchise and extend it. And then the last example he gave was 100 years back with the Red Clydesiders, and you know, and John McLean, and you know, he's reckoning were all of them were perhaps unconsciously, but all of them kind of acting on that basic kind of feeling that, look, actually, it's up to us here. It's up to Scots to make these decisions. So I
I think
just think it's been fascinating.
yeah, we can't go forgetting what's come before and the people that have striven for Scots to retain their sense of self before. And there have been attempts. I mean, the Act of Prescription after 1745, that was supposed to last in their mind a generation. It ended in 1782. And that was an attempt to anglicise Scots, to deny them their culture and their way of life. But what worked even better than that, which is why your man said that there wasn't any real drive for this until the 1960s, is because what worked even better than that was the First and Second World War propagandas of we are one people, we are one
Yeah,
nation, we are in this together.
yeah,
People forgot all the previous contentions. They forgot everything that they'd been
yeah,
striving for
yeah,
previously. They forgot the people, the patriots that had been out for them, the William Burns's and the David McRae's and the Charles Waddies, and they forgot these people and they forgot what they'd been attempting to get. And there was this period of nothing, of Britishness, until people started going, oh, hang on a minute, nothing's changed. We're still in this crappy position. We still need
yeah,
to
yeah,
be able to fix this somehow. And then you had the rise of the SNP, and you had
yeah,
this drive for self
yeah,
determination
yeah,
again. And it was
yeah,
no longer home rule that they were wanting,
yeah,
because that had failed. We'd had hundreds of years of failing against Westminster purely because of the lack of representation and being denied representation outright. I mean, at the start, we were only to have 45 MPs to England's 400 or 500 odd. Do you know what I mean? So we've always had to negotiate and pull teeth
yeah,
for
yeah,
everything we've
yeah,
obtained.
yeah. Maybe that's another way of describing it, isn't it? That sort of lack of, I mean, these days we call it a democratic deficit, isn't it? And maybe that's just another kind of description for what's been going on for the yeah, the 300 years since those guys got together. Well, I assume it was guys. It probably didn't include any women in
Mainly guys.
1689. Well, you know, fair enough. That was the time. 1689 got together and created this claim of right document. And actually, it's just been really fascinating having a chat to you. We could go on for a long time, I reckon, but
There's a lot
maybe
to
we'd
get into.
better
Yeah,
maybe we'd better kind of stop there. Thanks so much for
very
coming
well.
and having having this conversation. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Great.
And a Zara cat.
Oh, that's good. Here's Fiona back. Can't hear you. You're
Can't hear
muted.
you.
There we go.
Hello.
Just going to say, before we stop recording, do you want to put a plug in for your show, Jenny?
Yeah.
Like the IndyLive show, or just the random Scottish history stuff?
Whatever. Do them all while you've got us. Hold on, and I'll disappear, and you can.
All right.
Shall we
I don't
just?
really know what I'd say.
Shall
I
I?
don't
Shall I
really
come out
talk
as?
about-
Shall I come out as well, Fiona? Shall I come out too?
Yeah, if you want. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So we just leave. We'll leave Jenny to do her own.
I feel weird doing my own plugs.
Okay, well, stay and I'll just make you bigger, and then Marlene, why you can ask a leading question like, and you have your own show, don't you, Jenny?
Okay.
Or something
Okay.
like
Right.
that.
Oh, right. So Jenny, you have your own show on Independence Live. Do you want to say a little bit about it, and
Sure.
then we can make sure that we get as many people as possible to look in on it.
Yeah, of course. So the last Friday of every month at 7 p.m., I am going to give a random offering of Scottish history to those that are interested. We've had, for February, because of Valentine's Day, we had Scottish courtship and marriage rituals. We also then had the potato famine, which wasn't so much to do with potatoes in Scotland. And we've just done unicorns, which was far more interesting than we expected it to be. Because they were very different creatures to begin with and had very strange origins to them. But yeah, also the Random Scottish History YouTube channel. We've got a lot of offerings. I think there's over 100 videos there now, show and tells and readings and stuff, and newspaper article roulette, etc. So there's a lot going on. So folks should check in if it's something that interests them, definitely. Randomness is what we're about.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I didn't mean to pop up in the middle there. You know what it was? I was just getting excited when you were listing those things, and I was going to say, oh, and we're podcasting as well. Some of the earlier stuff on Scottish Independence podcast. Steve,
right.
You know Steve, don't you? Our techie guy. He's getting them lined up for the next few Tuesdays. I don't know how long he's going to go on, but it's another way of getting you some, publicity. What we'll do, we'll get him to link in the notes. In fact, I think he already does all your channels and everything where you can pick up the show.
Yeah,
sure. I did a wee introduction to the Random Scottish History thing back in 2019, but so much has changed that last night, just before my job interview, actually this morning, I re-recorded a brand new introduction because I think I'm going to try and get into podcasting myself, just for some of the...
Well, listen, why don't you? Where is that? Because we can use that. We can podcast that for you.
It's being edited at the moment. I only just recorded it last night, so I'm going through it just now and edit. I think I'm about 50 minutes into it because it's taken absolutely ages.
Yeah. Well, listen, our podcast is, whatever we can do to help. Then we've got. We're calling ours the Scottish Independence Podcasts, and it's our shows that we do plus one that we don't do on YouTube. It's just a collection of audio clips of topical stuff, but then we've always got these guest podcasts, and we've had just anything we think that's interesting that people are up for us using. So if you wanted to have yours on that anytime, just give us a shout and we'll get, because we're getting 3 to 5 views
or something, I guess, like once it's up and going.
And I mean, you'd be able to set this up for yourself, but since we've already set it up, that Scottish Independence podcast, they get uploaded onto Podbean, but from there, they go out to Spotify, Apple, Google. They're all over. So if you wanted to, it's an easy way of making yourself, giving yourself as many options as possible for people to pick up.
The other thing,
information out there on as many platforms as possible for folks, so they have access to it in whatever way they're comfy with.
Exactly. Great. I mean, the other thing is we've on the Independence Live website, we've got a Scottish Independence podcasts, or a link to our web page for the podcast. So if you wanted, we could get them up on there as well. And that way it goes out in our blogs. So, that all these things kind of help each other,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah, I'm into it. Like, yeah,
Great,
whatever
fantastic.
information out there, like, you know, it's not my information, but it's information I feel everyone needs to know, you know. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right, well, that was a great interview. There was so much in there that's really going to add to what we've already got, and
Awesome.
links in really well. And great plug, Marlene, to the Tommy Shepherd clip, because I'm going to play that.
Yes, I was thinking I better mention Tommy Shepherd because I knew that she's got it ready to go. So great. Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Jenny.
Right,
Thank you so much.